This is my 6/22 final project, Mapping My World Revisions by Libby Peterson. All right, so my original, I showed a map of Wisconsin. This is where I'm from and where I live. I'm going to kind of break down where each of these things are just to give you a little preview. The green rectangle down here is Reedsburg, my hometown. The yellow is where I live now, Madison. The red is UW Madison campus, just kind of right next door. And then up above the yellow, high up at the north of Wisconsin, is Iron River, and the blue is Bayfield. So originally I wrote about Reedsburg and picked one slide. Reedsburg is my hometown. I lived in the same house my entire childhood that my parents still live in today. Reedsburg has a population of 10,000, and I had many of the same classmates from kindergarten up until high school graduation. Reedsburg is a growing community with changes happening, but it is a small, rural town that can be closed-minded. The picture I included is of the coffee shop I worked at for 5 years. I saw my bosses as an extension of my family. We were very close, and that feeling of care and loyalty is a common occurrence in my small town experience. Then next I jumped up north to Iron River. Iron River is a tiny town in northern Wisconsin where my family vacations in the summer. My brother and dad are members of a deer camp that has a cabin on the Pike chain of lakes. My grandpa was one of the original members of the camp. Some of my best memories are at this cabin, on the lake, and in Iron River. I think of the memories and my family when I think of Iron River. It is very small and 4 hours away from Reedsburg, so I feel a connection whenever someone knows where Iron River is. And then next I went a little bit farther north to Bayfield, which is at the very tip of Wisconsin. So an hour north of Iron River, my grandparents have lived in a house in Bayfield since before I was born. They summer in Bayfield and spend the winters in Madison near the rest of our family. You can see Lake Superior from their porch, and I can picture the cool breeze as the lake spreads over the whole town. It just is a great feeling. Bayfield is where we celebrated my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary and is another place that reminds me of family. My parents recently bought the Bayfield house for my grandparents because it was too much work for them to worry about the clerical aspects of homeownership, so I'm hopeful that Bayfield will be a part of our family for many years to come. And UW Madison campus, when I was deciding on a college, UW was really the only place I could picture myself and the only place I applied. Luckily, it worked out really well, and I was so happy to be there. It was the perfect fit. I loved my 4 years there. I also studied abroad one semester, which I'll talk about later on in my revisions a little bit more. And when thinking of the city of Madison, the college campus feels like a separate living entity from the rest of the city, which is why I separated it from the next slide, which is Madison in general. So after graduating college, I wanted to stay in Madison because I love student teaching and the district. And at the end of July in 2021, I landed a job at Mendota Elementary School. I quickly found an apartment that happened to be in the same building as my brother because I didn't have time to look around for a different place, which was special to get to live by each other too. I now live and work on the northeast side of Madison, and I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I just finished my second year in second grade, and I'm actually moving to first grade next year. I love my school, love my community. Most of my family lives within an hour of Madison, which is another important advantage to where I live. So that was my original Mapping My World project, and now I've revised it a little bit, primarily by adding a ton more by Reedsburg, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. So Bayfield and Iron River up north are still the same. The Madison's pictures are still the same, but then I kind of expanded on some of my Reedsburg pictures. So for my revisions, the primary place where I became the person I am today is Reedsburg. I lived there for 18 years, and I spent 3 more summers there in college. After further consideration, I realized that I could not narrow down my hometown into one photo, one slide, or one location. I added 3 more meaningful locations to my project in Reedsburg, although I could have thought of many more. So the picture that I originally included was this picture of Deli Bean, which was the place that I worked. This was the original photo. Deli Bean is a coffee and sandwich shop in downtown Reedsburg. It's where I had my first job. I started working there when I was 15 and continued to help out whenever I could until my bosses eventually sold the restaurant in 2019 to a new owner, and it just felt like a natural time for me to go. And I could really focus on work ethic with this slide. So one norm in my family is the importance of hard work and supporting yourself. Both of my parents have always worked. My mom's also a teacher, and my dad works for the USDA. And it was my idea to find a job the summer I turned 15. I wanted to begin saving up for college, and my whole family has a strong work ethic. And I'm proud to see everything that my parents have accomplished and all the additional things that they do to work hard. The next stop in Reedsburg that I wanted to focus on was Reedsburg Area High School, and I kind of looked at the lens of technology and social media with this one. So my high school is where I met with most of my best friends, who I still see a lot today. In ninth grade, I received my first smartphone and iPhone as a Christmas gift. So inside this school is where I experienced the internet on a personal level for the first time. I made some of my first posts at this school for musicals, dancing practices, and fun moments in class. At that point, I hadn't learned about the importance of monitoring social media intake and would find myself feeling compared to my peers. I definitely didn't have the critical media literacy that I am working on building now today. My world expanded with social media in high school, but it wasn't until I was older that I learned to create healthy boundaries with my phone. The next stop in Reedsburg is St. John Church, and I'm kind of focusing on religion, of course, with the church. So I was raised in the ELCA Lutheran Church that is down the street from my house. Unlike many of my friends, I had a really positive experience growing up with religion. I feel conflicted when I speak about religion because I don't necessarily identify as a Christian anymore, but I have nothing but positive things to say about my home church. I had a wonderful pastor, youth leader, and friends here, and I have memories of fun trips and youth group nights on Wednesdays. I imagine when someone sees a church in my slideshow, they would at first assume I'm still very involved with Christianity. While that's not the case, my experience here helped shape me into the person I am today, and I enjoy returning for holidays with my family. And my last stop in Reedsburg is my house. So this is a Google Maps photo that has not our current cars or anything like that anymore, and I wanted to focus on culture and ethnicity. So this is the house I lived in from the ages of 2 to 17, and I still consider it home. Some of my favorite memories in this house are our annual Set into My party that we host for Norwegian Independence Day. My family is proud of our Scandinavian heritage, and one will find Norwegian sweaters, flags, dishes, all those types of things in our home. My older relatives, like my great uncle, have also created in-depth family trees, tracing our lineage back to Norway in the 19th century. I also recognize how privileged we are to have access to that information that far back and to know that my ancestors at that time were free people who were able to immigrate of their own volition. Now, Iron River, this is the cabin that I always stay at with my family. I wanted to kind of look at gender. So in my original post about Iron River, where my family has a cabin on Heart Lake, I talked about familial relationships and friendships. After further consideration of positionality, I thought about the ways gender is played out in our family on these trips. My brother and dad are always the ones to pull the boat trailer and typically drive the boat. I have my boater's license and am capable, but often choose not to. My brother and dad are also in charge of the outdoor chores like starting a fire, chopping wood, and mowing, where I typically help with cleaning and taking care of the dog, things like that. Another thing that I've been thinking about after looking at my original Iron River post is that my dad and my brother are members of the deer camp, and so is my grandpa. And actually, women are not supposed to be members of the deer camp. It's only been white men throughout the history of the camp since about like the 60s. So that's definitely an important consideration with gender as well. And Bayfield, kind of just adding on, when I was speaking out with family in the earlier one, Bayfield is where my grandparents live half of the year, right off Lake Superior. When I was a kid, my cousin and I would spend a week up north with my grandparents, and we would go to the library, play at the park, paint on the front porch. Bayfield's one of my favorite places in the world because it's connected to some of my favorite people. I have a really close relationship with my maternal grandparents. When people see Bayfield, they may assume it's full of wealthy people and houses on the hill because it kind of looks really old world and fancy, but my grandparents bought the house really cheap in 1996 and I've lived there ever since. They live a really simple life of reading books, drinking coffee, watching Masterpiece Theater on public television. It is still one of my favorite things to visit them. And UW-Madison, I kind of thought about worldview. So while Reedsburg is where I grew up and formed many foundations of my life, college is where I grew as my own person. I learned to be more independent and widen my worldview. Reedsburg is a close-knit community with a lack of diversity, while UW-Madison could certainly be more diverse economically and racially by eliminating some barriers. I certainly learned more about different cultures and walks of life, and my worldview grew tremendously when I studied abroad in Spain my sophomore year and lived with the host family. I learned to be okay on my own and appreciate differences even if they felt scary at first, which I think is a very important life lesson. And where I am today at Mendota Elementary, I wanted to focus on race. So I've taught at an elementary school on the northeast side of Madison for 2 years. Our school is made up of about 60% Black students, 18% white students, 15% Hispanic students, and 7% Asian students. This contrasts greatly to Reedsburg or even UW-Madison. In college, I learned about white privilege and economic barriers to Black communities in theory, but I experience it now in my everyday teaching career. I also have the honor and responsibility of teaching my Black students about the importance of their history and their joy. I love my community, and I'm very happy to serve as a teacher. So now thinking about why it's important for my students to have critical thinking to use media and literacy skills, many of my second graders speak about viewing and creating TikToks and watching YouTube videos, and they often ask questions about if a video is real or fake. So they're curious about what they see online. Even as a teenager, I was not able to discern proper technology use for myself, so 7-year-olds certainly need guidance as well. Giving children tools for analyzing viewing things online is necessary because I'm not able to hand pick what they see and don't see when they aren't with me. And then for an assignment like Mapping My World for my students, I would love to complete an assignment like this with them, where they pick a few important places they've been to in their life. I appreciate the flexibility of the format because some of my students have housing insecurity and don't stay in the same place for long, so they could pick something as broad as Madison or as specific as our school to include on their map. Considering their world can help ground them in their community and the people they love in their community. Thank you for listening, and that's the end of my project.